when we started shopping Margot, and we were shopping it for a really long time, and we worked with so many amazing producers. It taught me so much. I learned the art of the pitch and all of that stuff. A nightmare. The fact that I'm so grateful that I have the acting background, because if when I'm just in writer brain, I'm like, I can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
But that being said,
yeah.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Nerd on the Podcast. You didn't need, but you deserve, where all levels of nerd are welcome.
Yeah, you are.
Today, we are joined by the writer and creator of Are You There, God? It's me, Margot, the star of Missy Meanie in Ned's Declassified, and of course, the star of Everclear's wonderful music video.
Oh, you're really digging in there, aren't you?
Most importantly, my dear friend Carley Casey is here on this Nerds Explained episode. Before we get too far into it, though, I'm Corey.
I'm Tom.
And I am Josh. And you already, there's
Carly.
And this episode is brought to you in part by the members of the Nerd On Nation, that is powered by Patreon. As a member of the Nerd On Nation, you do get fun perks, like you get bonus episodes that nobody else hears. You get early access to these episodes. You get a lot of fun perks. One of my favorites is you get secret channels on our super public Discord server that only you have access to.
This is true.
It is very true. Very true. And you also get what we call the Nerd On Nudge on our other weekly show, the Nerd On Update, where we answer your questions first. But check it out. Do consider joining that, because it does allow us to keep the literal lights on and just keep upgrading our content and being the best that we can be.
Just 4 quarters, baby.
Just 4 quarters.
That's all you need.
We're getting
when you
close.
put it that way.
It's
Right.
so easy. It's so easy.
That's right. This is the best dollar you can spend in your life.
Yeah. So check it
All
out.
you could spend.
Nerdon.tv/Patreon and nerdon.tv/Discord. And a huge shout out to our other partners in crime, Odyssey, Apogee, and
Embody, yada, 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 yada. So since that ends our housekeeping, let's get on with the rest of our episode. Carly's here to speak with us today on our Nerds Explained series. We're going to be talking about screenwriting and more importantly, her, what do you call it, script therapy? What's the official title of the program, Blank Page Coaching?
Really good question. No, essentially screenwriting, I guess, coaching, but the niche really is accountability for people, because screenwriters need it. Well, listen, we all need it, but I've really found through my own journey and through everyone else's journey that there's accountability needed. And so that's kind of my niche, but I do a little bit more than that. But yeah, it would be screenwriting coaching, I guess.
Cool. And that is Blank Page Coaching. Before we get into that, though, let's take it back a bit. And just kind of where did you started in the industry young, but where did this screenwriting kind of take place? When did that become a focus for you?
I did a lot. So as you said, I've been working in the industry since I was child.
I did bring out the music video. That was on me.
You did. I
couldn't resist it.
It's been a minute since someone threw Everclear in there, but after many years, after reading 6 billion scripts, I was like, I just started getting older and being like, maybe I want to do this. And then the older I got, I was like, no, I do want to do this, because so many of the things I was auditioning for, I was like, I want to try. And so I want to say 7 years ago, 8 years ago is when I started doing half scripts.
Okay.
Hence why I say accountability. I was doing
dipping the toe in.
half it, I have such a good idea, and then I wrote half a script.
So act 1 and 2 can't get it.
Can't.
Okay.
Sometimes just act 1. You know what I mean? You're just this is so good. And
just
then,
the vibe of it.
Just the vibe. You're riding that vibe for the first act, and then you're just we're done here. So I just had a lot of those, and I was giving way too much meaning to not being able to finish anything. I guess I'm just not supposed to. All the things, all the things we do. We all do it.
Yeah.
And then finally one day, a mentor who was also an acting coach for me and just became family one day, he was like, we had been at dinner and he was like, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I love you so much. And I was like, I want to finish a screenplay. I really just want to finish a screenplay. And so he was like, all right, let's meet up every 2 weeks and you're going to finish it. And I was like, okay. And because I respected him enough and he was it was just there was just enough to be like, I'm going to feel like an ass if I'm wasting his time and I'm not doing it.
If I show up empty-handed.
And there was no it was certainly what I'm doing with people now is far more specific, but it was literally just every 2 weeks we're meeting up for coffee and we're going to read your pages or we're going to at least talk about them. And it was terrifying, but it ultimately,
It gave you a deadline.
it gave me a deadline and it changed everything for me. And so from that point on, for now, probably more like 6 years or so, it's been like nonstop writing. And it's just like, but it definitely came from feeling frustrated by so much of the stuff I was auditioning for and just being like, there has got to be better ways to tell stories than this for women, but also just people in general. There's so many brilliant projects out there, but there's also so much crap.
Be the change you want to see.
Be the change you want to see.
I want to dive into that a little bit just because I feel like there is a trend of people who are kind of like taking matters in their own hands, right? And there's a lot of, I think, great writers that aggregate out of being in front of the camera and then realizing there is a space and a gap where they can exist and tell their stories. So I want to kind of ask you what are the things that you are writing? What are the themes, the subjects, the characters that you found that like was just missing that you now are occupying or
it
populating?
felt like, and you're seeing a little bit more of it now, but it's still like it's more complicated, and we can like get into that later about like what people are actually buying right now and all of that. But you're seeing more complicated women portrayed now, but I really felt like 6 years ago or so, it was like everything was hot girl, and she has nothing to offer anybody but her hot girlness, or mean, just mean. Like it was just, or drunk, only drunk. Like it just felt like it's one note. We have no arc. And then
doesn't know how pretty she is.
Oh, good. We need to start like charging
know.
people who are putting that in their descriptions. Like she's gorgeous, but she doesn't know. And you're like, what does it even mean?
How do you I don't know how to physically.
You can't.
I really thought that was going to end when I saw Not Another Teen Movie, and they're like, takes the glasses off and goes, "You're beautiful," and I was like, "Thank you," and then it still happens all the time.
I had a friend the other day who's a screenwriter that who was like, so apparently people, they just want to buy Ted Lasso and Squid Games now.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I mean. Yes, it's in the industry, but so essentially at the time it was feeling like so much of it was one note female characters and also not written well. Like the dialogue, like literally being like, one of the biggest things, and you know this, is that I'll say, did they read this out loud before they had someone audition for this? Because there's dialogue that you'll get as an actor that you're like, this doesn't.
It's not even grammatically.
It's grammatically a mess. But it also, like, if you say it out loud, it doesn't make sense. And so then you find yourself as an actor kind of doing your little ad lib to like make it work and sound better and all that
also,
stuff.
like as an actor, like you're reading the script and you're like, am I gonna be effed if I add the word that's supposed to be there?
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
They
they're
know
like,
the typos
don't
here
ad-lib
too, right?
too much.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
I just want the
crazy.
sentence to make sense.
Right.
I just don't want to come off as an idiot.
I feel like there needs to be a noun in here. And
100%. It is, and it's insane when you do know how many stages it has to go through to get to the audition point that you're like, there's no reason, you guys,
sure,
for it to be here still. Like someone had to have put up a red flag, but no. So I think it was just a lot of that, honestly, of just being like, I wanted to, and I know this sounds so silly, but I'm telling you, it's so real. Being blonde, like I know it's like, but I literally, it's like if you are blonde, you don't get taken seriously for dramatic roles. And I had like, and I've dyed my hair before, but I started getting like, my friend Joy was like, you need to be the rebel blonde, because I had reps being like, dye your hair brown, they'll take you seriously then. And I was like, what
Why?
does that mean?
Yeah.
I get it, it's not that hard. I can go dye my hair, but I was like, that's madness. That's a problem if we can only see a blonde.
Are we still making decisions based off cliches?
yeah.
Oh God. I mean, again, and like blonde is the stupidest example, but it even goes that far, is my point. Is like even stupid hair color was like, well, it was, and also after having done like Missy Meany, a cheerleader on Nickelodeon, it was just like always the perpetuation of like mean girl roles and stuff, where I was like, okay, it was fun when I was 14 to 16.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm ready to explore some other stuff now. And I have been very fortunate to do cooler stuff. And that is part of why I was like, okay, there is cool stuff out there.
Right. There's always exceptions along the way. Yeah.
I like so many of the things I've worked on as an adult, I was like, I'm the luckiest person on the planet. But I was like, but I want to be part of that. And I want to stop sitting here and just being mad at all the other crap.
Right.
Well, you're providing solutions instead of just shaking your fist at the
100%.
air. And I feel like there also goes in, you talked about hair color, but also there's body types, right?
Oh
and
my
it's just
God,
like,
yes.
if you're a bigger person, you're always gonna be the joke for no damn reason.
Yep.
Instead of like, oh, they're the leading role.
It's
so.
beyond fucked up. It's beyond fucked up. And I think we're scratching at changing it now, but it's still, I think there's still a lot of like, hey, look over here, we're doing this. But like behind the scenes, it's still so slow to change.
Yeah, and I think it's because, decision makers, wherever they have you, is only thinking with their lizard brain and going very visceral of like, oh, this is what's been done for the last 30, 60 years. And so, it's about time to have a little bit more sophistication in the writing, which I think you're scratching.
And just nuance. I'm like, that's like one of my favorite words is like nuance. We've seemed to have lost it.
Yeah.
As a country, as a world, as in everything. In arts, I mean, you can look anywhere and look, it's like we've lost nuance, and I'm obsessed with nuance.
Well,
like
everyone wants to be able to easily categorize a thing and not have to think for it.
Yep.
So that's why like everything's called content. It's not called a painting or music or a film. It's like, oh, it's just content. They're a content maker.
Yeah.
Versus like you could say like, oh, it's a comedy. It's like, well, it's more of like a coming of age drama that has comedy in it.
Absolutely.
You're also starting to see, which is a breath of fresh air for me, but it's not as much as it should be. But mental health is being talked about a lot more, not as much as I think it should be. But it's starting to be more nuanced. Like I think where people are going into things that aren't just trauma, they're going into the nuances of trauma and stuff like that. Like it's starting to be a bigger opening up the conversation instead of just the cliches of this is what we're going to talk about. There's it does look like changes are happening in terms of what content is being put out.
Yeah.
No, I do think there is. It's just like a trickle. It's like,
done.
I feel like, for instance, like Ted Lasso. Like, I mean, I absolutely love that show, but I do like, I think everybody goes like, well, look, we have Ted Lasso, and you're like, you're pointing to one show.
The exception.
And thank God for that, because it's on air and it's doing so well. But you're like, but the fact that it's hard to come up with like 5 other off the top of your, and there's so much out there that it should be easy to be like, during this time in the world, like my husband and I would always be like, at the end of the day, you're like, oh, what do you want to watch? And we're like, everything is sad and stressful, and the anti-hero is still so loud, and I'm like, that's why it was like Ted Lasso, like when it hit, it was like being thirsty for 100 hours and finally having a drip of water. It was like, oh, like kindness can be fun to watch, like all of that stuff.
Positivity.
So
right.
What?
Who would have thought?
It's the reason, like, my wife and I still have that issue at night. Like, we'll have these long days and come home. Like, there are tons of things I should be watching, and then we go, should we just like put on New Girl for like a little bit, just to,
but
like,
also because New Girl is so good.
Yeah, but like it's that feeling of like I just need something that is
should we
easily
watch The Walking Dead or Ted Lasso?
Yeah, right.
Probably go to bed with Ted Lasso in your brain.
And I mean, I think you're talking about like how like we have Squid Game and we have Ted Lasso, and I think what tends to happen is a lot of people just take the wrong lessons from that, and they're like, oh, I want to do the next Ted Lasso. It's like, well, how would you do the next what you got?
Well, especially because, like, I'm sure you guys have seen the article about the creator of Squid Games. Like, it took him 10 years to make that.
I mean, same thing with Queen's Gambit.
That you're like, and ultimately people had to take a chance.
Right.
We're all everything is a chance. That's the thing. But like, someone had to take a chance to do Squid Game, and that's the only way we saw it blow up is because someone took a chance on a concept that took 10 years. Like that
doesn't fit the formula that they know as success.
100%. And now everyone's trying to replicate that, and you're like, oh. And I don't blame people for trying to do that because everyone's trying to get their foot in the door. But at the same time, you're like, but the only reason Squid Game is because there was nothing like
nothing out
Squid
there.
Game out there.
It's
the irony. Nuance.
It's nuance.
It's the irony that we always talk about in the industry of like, I can't get experience unless I get the job, but I can't get the job without the experience. And you're like,
I mean,
whatever. Cool.
I'll just sit back here and know this and be angry. Cool.
Right. We can go on all day about like kind of I think the issues with that, but I do want to talk about your process because our listeners I think have been kind of clamoring and kind of wanting to get our perspectives on the things that we talk about, which is TV, films, books, and all that stuff. But for you in particular, like, what is your how would you go about writing? Does it come to you? Do you set out to like, I'm going to tell this story? Break it down if you can, without sharing too much secret sauce, I guess.
Oh,
yeah, right.
I feel like everybody's secret sauce is so unique to themselves that like it's impossible to give anything away, specifically with writing, I feel like. And that's one of my favorite things about working with people is realizing like, oh, like really what makes everyone tick is so different. But for me, like I've had different experiences. Like the web series that I did was reactionary because I had written my first feature film that I was very excited about. Woo. And we went to like shop it around. I had some amazing people like helping me out. And all the feedback we were getting was like, this is so great. Oh, the story needs to be told. But unless you have a male celebrity attached, it's never going to happen. And so my web series came as like a reaction to that. It was like, oh, really? Like, and my husband's a cinematographer and he's brilliant at what he does. So that helped. But he's like, I'm going to help you. We're going to do this. And so that came to me, but it was reactionary. It was like, I was pissed off that I kept being told I needed a celebrity male to do something. Yeah, I was like, I felt even stronger. Like, I'm going to tell women's stories and they're going to be great and they're going to be nuanced and they're going to be messy and relatable and all that stuff. So that was organic, but it also was just like, I don't know. It was a different type of passion kind of burning. And it came out of me like, because they were short, I could just sit down and in like 2 hours, I'd be like, there's a 5-minute episode.
Would you say that you were writing, for yourself or writing for like people like you?
Both. I've always kind of gone off of like, I write what I would want to see because that's the only thing I can trust. If I'm writing for what I think other people want to see, I'm screwed. Like once I'm out there.
It's like an extension of the phrase, write what you know.
100%.
Yeah. People know they're being pitched to, they're going to know it.
100%.
And it's that thing, the other thing I noticed about at the time as well, and it's still a very big issue, is that the women-led comedy is still not seen as like a viable option. Like we had Broad City is the biggest one I can think of, but there's so many like, I don't know if anyone here has watched I'm Sorry, but I love this show. It's written and created by Andrea Savage. And one of the biggest things that I hear other people say about it is like, yeah, she just, she's a bit much. And I was like, right, but you have people like Jack Black and shit like that, and you're fine with it. How is she a bit much on her own show? And it's just because there's this outdated view that women can't be funny. And I think your web series was a wonderful foil to that, to be like, hi, yeah, we can.
We can. And it's like, and again, the way I appreciate humor is you guys, I'm sorry. You should, at this point, it should be a drinking game. Nuance. But I again, like to me, like so much of my friends, like when we laugh our asses off, it's not because someone landed like the crazy punchline. It's just because there's like a wit innate to women and humans, men too. But like we don't see women as much as like witty and whatever. So I wanted to write like what my experience with my female friends is on the average day, and then just crank it a little, like have that slight sense of heightened whatever. And so that's really that came to me like just, I would sit down, I would have like a little bit of an idea floating. I kind of like see the movie in the head before, write it out. And that one was, in hindsight, I can't tell if it was like the stupidest choice or the smartest. I didn't really show it to anyone. I just had friends that trusted me and I sent it to them and I was like, do you guys want to do this with me? And they shockingly were like, yeah. And we shot it and we did it. And so like, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margot is like so freakishly, vulnerably me. When now I'm like, I can't imagine making something and not having people I trust. Like, can I get some eyes on this, you guys? Like, is this actually?
Sure.
But I think it was just like.
That's kind of beautiful in a way because it's a very not unedited. What am I trying to say here? Yeah. It's just very you in a very unhindered sense.
Just because it's specific to this particular thing, because my wife is a writer as well, and she has some scripts that are very, very personal to her based on very personal experiences that she went through. And there was a process of starting to shop them around, and the concept of somebody else playing this character that is so personal. Like she's like, but that's me.
Yeah.
I said that thing in real life. Like, do you find that to be a hard part of the process when you're like, it's writing something so personal that when you're shopping it around, you're like, wait, there's a possibility that as an actress, I won't be playing this part because they'll want somebody big or famous to be playing it. When
we started shopping Margot, and we were shopping it for a really long time, and we worked with so many amazing producers. It taught me so much. I learned the art of the pitch and all of that stuff. A nightmare. The fact that I'm so grateful that I have the acting background, because if when I'm just in writer brain, I'm like, I can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
But that being said,
that's where the good stuff is.
Panic attacks late at night.
But with that, when we were pitching Margot, essentially from the digital, using the digital series as hey, do we want to go somewhere with this? Every group of one that we got further with was okay, so who would play Margot? And I'm like, I'm playing with my hair, so
funny
me?
Story.
That me that's sitting right here. But then it was the first very sobering moment. I knew that it would happen, but it was the first moment where I really had to be look, I'm gonna just lay it out here. I want to play this part. Will I stop this from getting made if I don't play this? No, I won't, because I believe it's a story that should be told.
Goodbye,
but
darling.
I will fight to play this part. that being said, now let's talk about other people that could play it. And so it was that one in particular, because Margot it is not me. I always say that. I'm like, it is not me, but it is absolutely like the most neurosis filled, like all the insecurities, all the things kind of channeled and heightened. But everything I've written since then, I either don't want to be in, or there's like one film in particular that I'm like, I will be in this. Like it will, but
I will be Stallone.
I will be in this. But it's not based on me. It's like this
It's a little more.
Yeah, this script is like an emotional truth, but anyone that would know me would be like, nothing about this represents your life. But it's like the emotional theme is there. So
I connect with this so much.
Like this is somehow it feels like my DNA. And yet, like I said, like anyone that would read it that knows me would be like, nothing about this is your exact life. So that's a fun, but that's what's the beauty of writing is I think sometimes when you hear like write what you know, people take that too literal sometimes where it's like,
they're writing autobiographies.
Well, I can only, exactly. And you're like, no, do that if you're good at that. But also like you can write your emotional truth into things that don't in any way represent
you can
your
write
day-to-day.
what you're going through.
Absolutely.
You're telling the story about like these people have to survive the apocalypse, but then you write like if you're going through a breakup, then you write about like how that character has to get through that stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
So there is you inside it and then with nuance there comes subtext.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not just the plot, it's what is it about? And if it's not about anything, then it's not really a story.
Right.
It's just like things happen, So I did want to ask just a little bit because I feel like there is this sense of, I think with writers finding their voice in their writing, and what does that mean, and in your style in particular. Is that something that I feel like that kind of came naturally for you, or is that something that you kind of like you had to whittle through the rewrites?
Some unlearning had to happen, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it actually took working with one producer consistently, and then getting a lot of feedback channeled through him to me about different projects where everyone kept being like, she has such a distinct voice. And I literally was like, what are you talking about? Cool. Like that thing where you're like, oh, yeah, for sure. But if you
I'm just a good storyteller.
If you had asked me the day prior, Carly, do you think you have a distinct voice in your writing? I'd be like, fuck no. So it was so I do sometimes think that is a trigger for writers, and it stops them from actually just writing because they're like, I gotta find my voice, and I have to know my voice. And I ultimately think like your voice is who you are.
You're
when
unique
you write.
as you are.
Absolutely.
My God. I mean, this is a different move here, but with music, I would write a song that wasn't my tone and I would play it for people. They're like, oh, that doesn't really sound like you. And I'd be like, okay, it's trash. It's fine. I'll throw it out. And they're like, no.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to do the Ed Sheeran thing, right? It's like, all right, fine, Justin Bieber, you could take it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and also that is part of writing though, is sometimes knowing like, I do think you can keep a sense of self in different genres. Like I have genres that I like are more comfortable in and enjoy more, but like right now I'm writing something that has like a tad bit of like sci-fi in it that I never in a million years would.
We're gonna dive into that later.
If you would have told me that, like even if I don't know, like a year ago, I would have been like, you're insane. Like I would not because I don't love sci-fi, but I just was like, that is not like my comfort zone at all.
That's not my unique
You're like,
voice.
That's not my unique
I'm a
voice.
tourist here. I'm not like
exactly. I'm a tourist here 100%. And yet, again, constantly going like, okay, but my voice is going to show up in anything I write.
Right. Yeah.
Like it literally, and so I do think so much of screenwriting is like this weird, mysterious, like floating orb in front of everyone that they're trying to figure out like, what is the hack? And it's like, there's not.
No,
and
there's
so
not an
I
answer.
think when people say find your voice, they really mean like, do whatever you can to get as comfortable as you can be in your own self so that your writing just reflects you. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that you don't then take notes though, because you could have the most distinct voice on the planet and people are still going to be like, I don't really understand this, or you know what I mean? And so I think it is a little bit of a dance, but I certainly didn't go looking for my voice. I just kept writing over and over and over.
It's a
again.
muscle you build.
honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's training, it's discipline. And I feel like it's kind of like when you do find those moments of like you get notes and you're like, oh my God, that's my voice. And but no one ever writes a great first draft, right? And you have to then like, okay, if they didn't get that, then there's something about the way I tell a story that's like, I have to get them to understand this.
Absolutely.
So whether that means more in the back end or in the front end, to get to the point that like they had the note on. So
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say it's something that I want to draw focus to of this series that we're doing, Nerds Explain, that we're talking about these things that we know about, that we have a lot of experience about. And I like to think of the phrase of like, it's not better, it's not worse, it's it's different. And it's like there is no one way to do a thing. Like we as individuals, as creators, as writers, as actors, whatever we do, we're unique.
Right.
And we find ways, like even just if you think of acting in particular, there are so many models. Stanislavski, there's all these different things that you could do, and you find your way. And at the end of the day, like people that are watching these episodes that are like, oh, I want to learn how to do this. And it's just like, this is Carlie's way
Yeah, 100%.
of doing this thing.
Sure.
And it's like, if you take something from this, like when we talked about post audio, it's like, if you take something from this, cool.
Great.
I would
That's
say
free. Like
there is
Yeah.
a wrong way, and it's doing it for someone else. I would say that's the
okay,
wrong
yeah,
way. Like,
okay.
and also,
I
like,
was about to get real mad.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where it's
No,
like,
you're right.
you know, like,
that was beautiful, but
like, you know, in every aspect, right? Like there's always the creative side, but there's also the business side. And there's going to be parts of you that's going like, I want to get the job. But then there's going to be part of you that's saying like, I need to be true to myself. And the wrong way in between those two is like, well, I want to do it because I want to be the next, I don't know, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Right. So it's like, I want to be the next, this person's like, well, you don't do that because they're already that person. You have to
Absolutely,
be
yeah.
the best version
Same
of
thing,
you.
but like Squid Game. Don't be the next Squid Game.
Right.
don't be the next Squid Game, call it Crab Game, you know.
I wanna bring it back real quick though, because Tom mentioned something about like no one writes a first draft perfectly, and that was like literally the hardest thing for me to learn. Still unlearning that. When you were getting started in this, like what do you think was the biggest struggle for you to like let go of or unlearn or in that kind of regard?
that's a really good question,
Yeah.
Corey.
We try to come to the table with those.
Yeah. I think I you know me, my big thing is normalizing the process
Yes.
of writing, because I've also learned everyone needs it. Like it doesn't matter if you've been doing screenwriting for 10 years. You need to hear like, hey, your first draft's gonna suck. So
Yeah.
just get it out. That I had a little bit of that, but I honestly think it sometimes for me still now is in my rewrites, allowing myself to go like, yep, no, this is it. And that I a lot of times will be like, it never feels done to me
I see what you're saying.
because
Yeah.
it feels like again, I know it's emotional truth and I want to make sure I'm getting as close, like what is on the page is as close to genuinely what lives in my head as possible. And so I get a little bit more tripped up on the rewrite of being like, not even perfection, because I don't think that exists with screenwriting at all. But I that is something I've had to know when to just go like, okay, it's done for now. Like at least for now. At
Not
the point of,
rewriting
like,
it to death
yes,
to like
because also like you can't, you just can take all the good stuff out of something when you
Sure.
do that. And I think
Band-Aids and Band-Aids.
100%. And then you're creating new issues that aren't, and then I also think getting to a point where it took a little bit of time, but I'm very much comfortably now in a place with projects when I do go to a producer or I am meeting with someone who is interested in a project, knowing where my line is. Like knowing where I'm flexible and where I'm open to changing things about story and where I'm not. And like knowing it's okay to have some things that you're not, as long as it's not everything. No, I'm just like that is unacceptable, I feel like, in anything. But it took a little while also, I just think as a woman to like own a space and be like, I don't want to come off as a bitch if I'm like, no,
Well,
this is
which
a
is a
no.
whole-
That's
This is a no
That's
for
the
me.
uphill climb that you have to do is because
100%.
every time you have come up, it's like, well, maybe we can collaborate more on this. Then you're showing you're being abrasive to them instead of being nice about it. So
Like I had
it's
one
dumb.
producer who was like with Margot at one point, and like it wasn't even a bad note. It was like the opposite. Like part of like Margot, the character, was like she did not know what she wanted with her life. It was like everyone around me knows what they want and what they're doing and they're successful in it, and I don't know. And this one producer was like, I just think the story would make more sense if she was a realtor, and it was, and I was like,
That's the whole point.
okay, but why? And it was like, I
just got a midi migraine
I
from
ju-
that, like a little one. Just it's gone now.
But like
I'm
that,
fine.
and ultimately I was like, no, she's not going to be a realtor, because you're not even giving me the why. Like, you know what I mean? You're giving me a note, but you're not giving me a why.
Mhm.
And so if you feel like her struggle is boring to you, then it's probably
Not for you.
It's probably
Right.
not for you, and also good
Right.
for me to know. But then like that's what the note should be, not like she should be a realtor.
Well, that's like Always Sunny. I love their story so much because they pitched it around, and the original idea for Always Sunny is they were all going to be actors in LA, and no one wanted to hear it because of that. But then FX took the chance, heard it, and he was like, look, I love this. He's like, my only note would be, why don't you just have them own a bar in Philly, and then they have all the time and money to do whatever they want. And they went, there's the reason. That's
Yeah,
a good
and
reason.
that's a brilliant reason.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think, to that point, there's, again, certain producers who are just gonna be like, oh, well, the character should have a want immediately, and then we should just follow that journey versus a character that is kind of figuring it out, and that's the journey. I think, have you seen the film Adaptation?
No, I don't think I have.
There is a great part about it where there's a conflict between
Nicolas Cage's.
it's Nicolas Cage, and then Brian Cox plays I think Robert McKean.
Okay.
And he's just pretty much saying like how like what if the character doesn't know what they want, and what if there's no satisfying resolution, and then the character just like, if you can't do that, then you should be a writer. And the movie exactly plays out that way.
Yeah.
There's no satisfying ending. The character doesn't learn anything at all.
Yeah.
And it's like there are stories for that thing, and I think you said a big point. Finding your space. I think the tough thing is like the space exists,
Yes.
but it's allowing people to have that space breathe. And I think with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margot. I think we talked about, or we barely talked about it, but I don't think there's time given to that space where it's allowed to breathe and allowed to live and allowed to like have people be like, people are going to watch it and be like, cool, I know exactly what it felt like. Do you know though? Like there are going to be languages in there as a dude that's not going to understand. And I think that's okay, but we should be open to conversation.
Yeah.
And then seeing how the work kind of distills itself during time and be like, oh, this is what it actually is.
It's part of that. I mean, this is a whole nother tangent, but you said talking about letting things breathe. And it's a problem with the formula that seems to be happening more and more in film is that everything needs to fit within a certain amount of time frame. You need to hit these arcs at this amount of time.
And merchandisable.
One of the cool
your
things.
Your page count has to be.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, it's why I love that David Lynch clip so much, where she's like, "Yeah, we could shorten the scene." He's like, "What the fuck is everyone's deal today?
Who gives a shit how long a scene is?"
But like one of the things when I took your program that was really wonderful was like, there's a guideline, but like do what you need to do to get this out there and make it feel right and make it your own. And I kind of want to touch on what you said about the rewrites, because one of the large things I walked away from with your program and screenwriting in general is kind of learning to trust your own instincts. And I think that's kind of how you find your own voice in a way. A big issue as I was having is I would leave these parts out. We would have our check-in. She would give me a note and I'd go, "Oh, well, I did have this thing." And she was like, "Well, then put it in the fucking draft. Stop censoring yourself a little bit."
Let someone else censor you.
Right. Yeah.
Well, because I'm not the first person to call, but I always, the PG version is I say your first draft is your vomit draft, or I prefer fuck it draft, where you just, every time your instinct is to put it there, like, this is your gnarliest one. This is the one to do it, baby. And so it was so funny because I would always say
sending this to your agent.
So I said, if you want, you and I are the only people that will even have ever known that this existed, and do that. And it was so interesting because you were like, yeah, no, totally. And then we would read it, and I would have a question, and then it would be like, well, I took that joke out, and I was like, it needs that joke.
Put the joke back in.
We agreed to your fuck it draft.
Yeah, and so just like hearing you talking about the like, don't over edit yourself too. Like that's interesting that it kind of goes hand in hand with that, is making sure you're trusting that emotional part of yourself that you're putting in there, and hoping, the thing that people resonate with stories that I've found for myself, at least being an audience member, is when you can find someone being really honest, whatever the story might be. Yeah. It's the same thing why I love watching comedies where you can tell the people involved are having the time of their lives. It's infectious. The honesty of an emotion in a story is infectious. And I think you do really well with that, especially like when I watched Margot for the first time, I was like, this is fucking incredible. This is one of the most honest things I've seen. And whether, like you said, I maybe I didn't get all of it just by being a male myself, but like it was a really touching series and I really loved it.
Thank you. But I actually have had this thought twice now. It's interesting. One of the biggest things I learned from Margot was the feedback I got from men. Mm-hmm. To be honest, like I wrote it for me in the sense that it, like I said, it was a little bit reactionary. I needed to know I could do this thing. And I'm so glad that I did it because it's opened up a lot of doors for me. But at the same time, my next thought was like, yeah, then it is probably for women, because if I'm feeling this way, then and also all of the women in it are my female friends that are actors that were like, hell yeah, we want to do this because we're sick of the crap that we're auditioning for, whatever. And also like they were willing to just take a chance with me. But is the feedback I got from men was actually, I was like, I think we all, like we do, of course, speak different languages to some degree. But I was like, but I also think that it's like, we don't always realize, even me as a woman, that like sometimes we do these categories like, well, this must be for women because a woman wrote it, all that stuff. And I'm like, actually, like so many of the dudes that I would be like, well, what did you like about Margot? And they would tell me, and I'm like, that's what I think's funny. So like ultimately, it's just because I wrote it and I had women and myself in mind with it. Like, it landed with men in a way I wasn't expecting.
Well,
but like,
you have a specific voice, and somehow the magic of the universe is that when you write for everyone, you write for no one. When you write for yourself, you
Absolutely.
hit
Yeah.
everyone.
Well, I think
100%.
part of that also is that we're so trained to be like, oh, that's a women's comedy.
Yes.
This is a
Yes.
men's comedy, and we
Well,
don't
just
get to,
based on
or
who the writer
Yes.
is,
or
whatever.
definitely have watched interviews or read interviews where they're like, yeah, this show that was kind of written by women, they made us include these jokes to make sure men were watching and like being part of the demographic, which weren't even the jokes that landed with men most of the time. So like it's a weird ideal that we've kind of been brainwashed to think that we
But
can't
it's also
all
in
laugh at the same
marketing,
shit.
like the
Sure,
way that
yeah.
they market a film,
Of
like
course.
in how different countries market things. They're like, oh well, this market is
They don't
largely they push towards males.
Sure.
So
Right.
it's a whole different trailer
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the film over here, whereas the way that it is on this market,
and
like
it's I'm going to take it to like a more negative approach. Of course, it's more it's just more tragic. I feel like we film is a language and writing is a language, and yet we're still divided in that in that visual art form. And so when you have different markets, you're like, oh, no colored people here, please. No women here, please. None of the explosions here, please. No ghosts. And it's just like, but the whole art as a form, like you're taking these, you're censoring it, right? You're misleading the audience, and then also they're skewing their viewing diet to like compound in these like archaic like viewpoints, and then also to that point of just like male viewing is sometimes seen as co-viewing. Where women viewing is its own like specific nuanced thing by itself.
That's a
like,
really good point.
Oh,
yeah.
look, Wild Hogs. Let's watch old guys do dumb shit. Like, oh, we don't want to watch fucking, I don't know, like the everything else. I'm just like,
Well, it's like,
why is
so
that the sense? Why is that the family movie?
For those of you who listen to our show, I sound like a broken fucking record at this point. But like
Fast color.
Fast fucking color. It's a story about 3 generations of black women who have powers, and they said they didn't know how to market it. Which is the craziest thing to me, because
You market it like an
a good
X-Men
story
movie.
is a good story
Yeah.
is a good story.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you think you should market it to. Put it out there. It's an honest, beautiful story.
I think going back into it, I think this is kind of what Carly was talking about, where it's like there's this mystical orb, and I think a lot of people are always under the pressure of like, well, I want it to be good, and what the mainstream or whatever people who make decisions say what's good is our products, and sometimes they're not stories. And I feel like when it comes down to it, like I think most people who are getting into writing find themselves just in a confidence, like a lack of confidence to tell their stories.
Sure.
Where like then there's people who actually are writing and trying to get it out there, and it's like then it's more of like the muscle they have to build, and actually like going out there and then putting their heart on the line and getting it crushed and coming back, and then it's like, okay, now I did the rewrite. And then once the rewrite, it's like, I think it's done, and you find the essentials that you're like, I'm not willing to break on this. And then it's like, now this is the story. It's been broken. It's been put in a way. It's been aggregated. It's been hitting against everyone else. Now it's time to put it out into the world and sell it. And I think that's also the next level of difficulty. So
I also think that, like, again, and I don't mean to point this out in screenwriters in a negative way, because I think it's literally true for every group of people in anything. But I do think there is a sensitivity that some screenwriters, not even just writers, like specifically screenwriters, have, because there is this feeling of, if I can just figure out the equation, then I get this thing.
The secret sauce.
Yes, and that's why you have, like, it's so funny because, like, again, I'm all about you find what works for you. And that's like ultimately what I love doing with other writers is I'm like, I'm not here to tell you what, like, this is how you do it. I want to help you figure out the most productive way to get you to a finished draft, to a next draft, like whatever that is.
and it's building confidence.
Did I just
You
do
did.
something?
Oh, you pulled the Corey.
That's a Corey.
That's a Corey. That's a real Corey. Just plug it back in right here. You'll feel it.
If you can feel it.
Every episode, it's right underneath.
Where?
Josh, help
Could
Josh.
you? Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
that's an actual pulling a Corey.
That is.
Well, I also pulled the.
Yeah. Oh,
Pulled the
okay.
Cordy.
Shit. Oh.
Send the check, Carly.
I'm done.
But I think, like, for instance, like when you hear like the stereotypical like save the cat and
Oh, yeah.
that stuff, like I've seen books like that paralyze more writers
Oh, yeah.
than it's actually empowered, or it gives them this weird sense of
That's
confidence.
the rule.
Yep.
That's
yep.
the rule.
Oh, well,
Oh, my
because,
God.
well, nope, actually, Carly, because on page 12, and you're like, but if it's ultimately not landing, it's not landing.
I'll say this because like we got you suggested a wonderful book to me, and it was definitely presented as a like, I think you should read this. Just remember that, figure out what speaks to you and fuck the rest. Like that's really what it is. And I read through this book and I definitely like cherry picked the things that was like,
Absolutely.
oh, this is gonna get me through my story. Because the truth of the matter is, like, yes, there can be a formula. Obviously, people are starting to follow.
Of course.
Shaped like a seashell.
But the ones that make it through, I'm going to bring up Squid Game again, is that like they didn't follow that formula. They wrote what was true to them and they figured it out and told their story. There's no right way. This is like huge.
And you know, obviously, like it's a great success story. It reminds me of a lot of like Rocky that was just like willed into existence, and like you have to sell your laptop.
Oh, the
and
movie,
stuff, like, the actual Rocky movie. But
Yeah.
I think to your point, like, you know, what you offer and trying to build confidence with writers, it's like diets, right? Everyone's like, do keto, do Atkins, do this. It's like, read this book, do that. It's like there's no one size fits all,
No,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no diet that helps everyone. There's no secret sauce. It's kind of like just trying to again build the confidence in that sense. And I think people to your point, get paralyzed to it. I think there was somewhere that Corey and I talked about you, and you talked about a little bit about script notes.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And-
yeah.
and
I
Craig-
listen to it all the time.
Yeah, and Craig Mazin's all about that, where it's just like there's no stupid formula. It's
Yeah.
And yet, okay, I want to actually dig into this for 2 seconds because I listen to that
Please.
podcast all the time, and I just want to say I fucking love that podcast.
But-
So no, not a but actually, and because I love them. I think what they're doing is in so many ways so much more helpful than 99.9% of the books that are out
demystifies
there.
everything.
All of it. That being said, what I also love about it that I don't even know if they're fully aware of is that some of the things that they say are completely counter. Like 1 week they will say one thing, and then 10 episodes later, they're kind of saying something else about screenwriting. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about like business and all that stuff. There's times where like they're like, there's not rules, guys. And yet I'm like, but the 3-page challenge exists
Is a rule.
because you're ultimately telling people what you like and what you don't like. And a lot of those things, when you've listened to enough, come down to some rules they have as their preference as readers.
How to
You know
make
what I'm
action
saying?
lines
Sure.
faster.
You might develop your own personal rules of like,
Right.
Absolutely.
This is what works for me, and these are my.
I think everybody.
10
a-
commandments.
Well,
100%.
there's also the thing where you follow your own rules, and then, you know, especially with songwriting, which I have more experience with, I would have my way like, oh yeah, I always write this first, and then a song would come along that I would break every fucking rule I've ever had.
Well,
And
I
it
want-
sounds like, I mean, they
I wanted
do
to
the
talk
same
about
thing.
songwriting a little bit because as it relates, because it's like, especially like you mentioned,
creative
rewriting,
process
the
of writing,
creative
yeah.
processing process, and the way, like even talking about rewrites. Like I've had songs that I workshopped, I went through, I had people sit around, we talked about it, we got the lyrics down. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is the song. And then I go to one of the songs on my album. I'm going to record the vocals, and a change in the lyrics comes up in my brain for those fucking chorus. And I'm like, nope, that's what it
That's
was
the new
supposed
one.
to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're like,
There were
rewrites
nights-
will happen. Like,
During the program I was doing with Carlie, which I want to get into here in a minute, there were nights where I would like wake up at 2 a.m. and go, I need to change this thing right now, because I knew I had the meeting the next day, and I was like, this needs to be in there before the meeting. It has to change now. And it would be stupid little things, but there's that little bit in you that's just like, here's your
Well,
choice. I don't care what time it is. It's going to tell you the choice.
it's the concept of write it down.
Yeah.
My wife as a writer is like,
Yes,
there will be times
yes,
where
yes,
I'll
yes,
wake
yes,
up,
yes.
I'll wake up and she's not there. And she's like, I had
Yes.
to write this. It's just a sentence.
Mhm.
I just had to write this down because your brain works in a funny way that you'll have a great fucking idea, but you will forget it, my friend.
Oh, it's
You
like
say
trying
funny,
to-
I say demonic. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, Carly, that's so good. You're totally gonna remember it in the morning. And I wake up and I'm
Never.
like, it's gone. It's gone.
It's like trying to remember a dream if someone asks you a question right when you wake up.
And you're like, ugh.
And you're like-
Yes, write it the fuck
Yeah.
down. Write it down. I absolutely, I'm so glad that you said that. I literally, you have to. You have to,
Yeah.
because I do think there are times we're all chasing flow, and I get into that a lot with the program.
Yeah.
Is like you
Inspiration.
kind of, you have almost the second you stop chasing it is when you actually invite it in and you find it. But those little moments that are 3 a.m. or whatever it is,
Yeah.
you're like sitting there available all day for the good stuff.
Work through me.
Yeah, work through me. And then all of a sudden you finally are like, your eyes shut and it's like, there it is. And I used to like dread that more. And now I'm just like, no, this is beautiful. This is
Yeah.
it. This is why I
Cool,
do
right
this.
now?
Because yeah,
All
like, once I get past like the, okay, all right, we're getting up right now. Like that being said, like those moments, like the last feature I wrote, like it was the first time I had a project like literally come through me, choose me, and like vomit itself out of me. Like I literally for like a few weeks, my husband, poor thing, he would just be like, "Oh, you're not really here right now, are you?" Like we would be at dinner and all of a sudden it would be like out of a movie. Like we'd be eating sushi and the chopstick would just drop. And he's like, I'm like, "Yep, sorry." Like phone out, write it out. And
I'm seeing it happen.
Yeah, and it felt I had never experienced anything like that before. And it felt literally like there was an alarm being rung that was like, if you don't write this down every time we come to you, you're not getting another chance with this.
And then you have to
100%.
find the flow.
That's why
Absolutely.
Sometimes you don't find the flow and you just have it down later on and it just kind of like a ghost. It lingers around in your brain and then you're like, okay, fine. But then I don't call it vomit. I call it fire. Like you're dragging, you're breathing your fire out.
Okay.
Finally. So you're like, oh yeah, I can actually get this done. It's like, this is nice. A lot of people are burning, the villages are dying. And I'm like, oh yeah,
I mean, that's why.
But then you say the whole script, this is a fire script. You know
I like
what I'm saying?
that. I like
Yeah.
that.
So that's why basic apps like Notes app.
Right.
Or I do like, you're like,
The best
oh,
app ever.
most often it gets into the miscellaneous folder, but for me,
Yep.
it's out there.
Yep.
Stays
Yeah,
correct,
but
'cause
make
like
sure
these-
you do write down more because I have a note that he says he laughs. Don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So just make
I've
sure,
also
maybe a
done
little
that.
context.
I know Corey's going to go into the program. I do want to ask one thing because we did mention the first,
Please,
when
yeah.
you first started writing, it was the half scripts.
Mhm.
And so from now, your experiences and also your, all the lessons and journeys, everything, what has kind of helped you now get to the full parts?
Truthfully, the thing that changed the game for me was having that friend of mine, that mentor that was like, we're meeting up every 2 weeks. I have to be honest, that was the biggest
The
piece of it.
accountability.
It was me going like, okay, look what accountability did for me. And that just shifted everything for me. And ultimately, and I'll be honest, I did do a lot of reading of the books. Like I'm not saying like I'm not trying to be like, you guys, those books listen,
Came naturally.
at all. No, I read certain books. But I also had like visceral reactions to some where I was like, this does not work
Speak
for
to-
me.
yeah.
And I was one of the only people like in my group. I have so many friends in the industry, but not a lot of screenwriting friends. So I was really like beta testing a lot with myself and then just being like, the only way I knew if it worked or not was like how I felt because I didn't have someone else to be like this, hey, I did this, hey, I did that. So ultimately like it was a lot of reading of books, trying out a weekend course on something, seeing what I liked from it, and then just continuously giving myself permission, but also knowing like once I knew I had completed one full draft of the first feature that I wrote, I was like, oh, I can do it. And from then on, it just became I can and then I will. And if there's a huge reason why I'm not, then it's fundamentally a story problem and it's not like my inability to finish something. And so
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
Really
And so
cool.
but again, I think it's just different for everybody. Some people just need accountability like every time. And there's nothing wrong with that because other people really still need to work on their ability to tell a story. It's like we all have different challenges. You know what I mean? So
my dad used to say there's a million ways to do one thing, but you're forgetting there's a million and one because there's also yours.
okay. I
Good
love
one,
that.
Dad.
Yeah,
Good one, Dad.
I
good
feel like you
one.
did like the perfect analogy of like the college student who like read all the books and then all of a sudden once they graduate they come back as like the professor's like I learned and all these books are garbage and
Now you have to work
on
the real book
breaking
is
it.
the book of life.
Well, the
Yeah.
wonderful thing about like with the book you suggested to me was like it does help to read it because whether or not you agree with it solely from cover to cover doesn't matter. It's the pieces that you pick out of it and then you create your own kind of
I mean
tool.
It's a formatting book too,
Right.
and that was part of that's the only book.
Oh, my format was trash.
Well, no, it was not trash.
Oh
no,
my God,
won't
I
let
learned
you do
so
that.
much,
It was not trash, but it was more like again, the biggest thing I say as far as like rules go, and this is just me is. Learn the rules to break the rules because you can tell the difference as a reader. Like when I'm working with when it's not about my own stuff and I'm working with other writers
so
and
easy.
I'm become the reader, I'm like, let me tell you, I can feel and see the difference when I know you're breaking rules that you've learned and when I know you're just out
ignorant
there
to it.
kind of going like boop. And ultimately the biggest thing you want with someone reading your script is having no excuse to stop.
Mhm.
And formatting, people, like I've heard so many people get heated about it. And I'm always just like, do you ultimately? But that being said, if it's too off the rails,
it gets hard to read.
It gets hard to read. But that being said, like the unfortunate or fortunate truth is if it's a really good story, someone will be more willing to deal with your strange format. If it's a good story, they'll be less, you know what I mean? It's just,
right.
I think that is one thing I do feel strongly about with people is like empower yourself to learn formatting and then decide after you know kind of what this industry standard is, you can then decide what you want to do with it. Because like as a reader, now that I've become a reader for so many people, I'm like, I kind of get it now. I kind of get why people have always been like, well, there's a way.
And it's tough because there's like it's a time. It takes time to read it. And I think we were talking about it right before we got into songwriting. Like I think people are more willing to that's fine. People are more willing to excuse that when they see that you've exhibited the rules,
right?
Yeah.
And
then all of a sudden you show that how you can break the rule.
Yeah.
Like like long action lines or something like that. Like I just gave Corey a script that like literally the first page is just like, this is what this movie's about, and it just tells you straight.
Oh, he's talking about Logan.
Yeah, it just breaks the fourth wall completely, and it's like, well, this clearly shows that this person, like, they did the first page and it's like, oh, this is what happens. And it's like, now here's an entire aside.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
if people
stop
fall off buildings.
It doesn't
die.
stop
Like,
your
this
enjoyment from reading the story.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, even though they're like,
I actually enjoyed that the most out of the whole. Like, I love the script, but that was like such a cool little, like, I've never seen this before. It works.
But it's kind of one of those like writer flexes of just like,
absolutely, yeah.
oh, I know how to write, and I'm going to kind of grab the reader and be like, I'm telling you what the story's about.
Absolutely.
Like,
I just read Sound of Metal the other day. And that, have you read that script?
I have not read the script.
It's so interesting because it is so readable. Like it is, and the actions are like a lot of dots, a lot of those. Where typically, don't do a lot of those. This, you could tell though, you're like, no, this is rule breaking on their terms. Like they are doing what they want to do.
It's intentional.
Absolutely. And so again, it's like, once again, there is no one way, but at the same time, like, it's just like, if you're newer, find the middle ground of what's out there and then empower yourself through that.
There's no one way to build a boat, but it has to float. But I you know what I mean?
Ooh,
You know what I'm saying?
And I feel like to that
you're
point,
rhyming.
You gotta read it.
you can read as many books on how to write, but then kind of reading just scripts that you like will help you like
absolutely.
tenfold. Because then also you start picking up those tools of like, oh, they write ellipses, they write the unwritables of like, this was the worst decision of her life. Like you don't act that out, you don't shoot that. It's like, oh, but it informs the reader of like, oh, this is a good.
I'm gonna use that as a segue because one of the first things we did with Blank Page, and I want to start talking about that program a little bit, was why I have a character who doesn't speak very much in the script that I chose to write. And the first thing Carly was like, well, read some scripts. She sent me Quiet Place, which was really wonderful. And like, I didn't know. I mean, it's very obvious at a hindsight wise, but like reading a script that has some of the characteristics of maybe something you're doing, or just reading the scripts that are in the genre you like, is so helpful for you to build the tool set that you need to be able to write in that.
It also helps you establish tone.
Right. Exactly.
Totally.
So totally agree with that. But I do want to move into this program, Blank Page. Tell us a little bit about it. I was fortunate enough to be in what I would call the pilot of it, which was really cool. I learned a whole bunch, but I want to know where it came from, like what's behind it, and how people can get involved.
It ultimately came from like the further down the path I'm getting on like my own screenwriting journey and the things I'm learning now about myself, but also just like just through life, as you said, like not from the stuff you were reading in books, but just like now that I've worked with enough producers, I'm starting to understand feedback in a different way and all that stuff. And so it came from like, okay, I want to give this back because I didn't feel a lot of that when I was, like I said, I didn't have a lot of people around me, and I could have totally chased mentorships and stuff like that, even though it is sometimes, I think, notoriously a little bit, sometimes can be a little bit more complicated. I don't want to say like with women, but like there's just whatever.
Yes.
I consciously did not do that, and I could have done that. So I'm not saying that there's not things out there that support up and coming screenwriters, but I just didn't see a lot of it around me. And I was like, I want to do something with this stuff that I'm learning.
Yeah, at least not in the way that you do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't want to just like harbor it for myself. I was like, I want to do something with this because ultimately it makes me feel good to know that other people who are in either the exact same shoes as me or like are a half step behind me who could benefit from this information or this whatever. I want to empower that. And I realized, I was like, again, I don't want to sit here and say like, I'm going to help you write your best script because I can't do that. Like, I want to help you finish it because that was the thing I kept, when I would talk to my friends who were dipping a toe in writing, it would be like, yeah, I'm really, it's like they would go like, 1 week, they're so stoked about this idea. Oh my God, Carly, it's such a good idea. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this energy. Get it going, girl. And then it would be like a month later. I'm like, so how's the script going? They're like, they just, as if they've seen a ghost. Like, they're just like,
What
talk
script?
about it. What script? What are you talking about?
It's literally
Why'd you bring that
distracted
up?
boyfriend meme of like finishing the script versus brand new idea. You're like,
Yes.
this new idea.
God, yeah.
100%. And so I was like, I was like, I do not want to be another like quote unquote guru because I don't believe in that, but I want
Get your script sold in 10 days. Like,
kill me. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to like, it makes it, I have a little headache from that. From saying that.
Yeah.
We have given each other little
I
headaches.
didn't feel great doing
it.
Here we are.
But yeah, I hate that. I mean, the thought of anyone thinking that that's what I'm trying to do makes me want to just like jump off a bridge. So that was not it. But I was like, but ultimately I think I have some stuff I've learned that can help people have the support they need to finish a script, or if it's a rewrite and they're like, I need the reason I've had a couple of people be like, wait, so is script there? I'm like, I need to figure that out.
I know I joked about that at the top because for me, I mean,
it is all, I mean, it's like emotionally all script therapy.
Yeah.
But I kind of call like the two things that I offer at the moment are script therapy is like, if you have a finished script, that you're like, I love this idea, but I'm stuck. Like I've either sent it to a couple people and I'm getting very confusing feedback or whatever. Again, there's so many resources out there right now where you can spend a shit ton of money, get like very basic cold notes, and that's the end of it. And my thing was like,
Tom's heart just broke.
Well, okay, let me break this down for 10 seconds, just because I've sent my scripts out to like several competition places. It costs like $80 to get 1 page of notes, and then they're gonna be like, "Well,
and that's on the cheaper end with some of these. It's like if you want to do like some of the stuff I was seeing that is semi inline. Well, no, what I'm doing is different, but like I saw multiple that were like $300 for reading your script and giving you a page of notes, and I'm like, that is insane.
Well, and this is the worst thing is like the first line I got from the notes was, "If this is a procedural," and I was like, "Are you shitting me?" Like, no, of course it's not a procedural. What the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly.
Did you read this?
Exactly to that point. The reason I call it script therapy is that I don't believe in the cold note. I'm like, because I'm also a writer, I'm like, let's talk. Like, I'm not going to be that. I'm not in no shade to producers, but because I have like the writer brain and I'm not just like, how could we get this much? I'm like, no, here's my notes, but let's get into it. Like, I want to hear like, okay, so this character, I want to understand like, why is he this angry? You know what I mean? It's not reading on the page. And so it's literally therapy. It's like, let's take your script and it's in the hot seat for therapy. And so that is, because I just got so tired of seeing all these people being like, even like on Twitter, you see people being like, oh, you know, like my rating, they gave me a really, or like I got a top 3 rating, but then they got like no notes back. And you're like, so how do you know what of your script landed and what did? It just feels like it's supposed to be helpful, but I don't know how helpful it actually is. And so one of the things I've done with friends for so long now that I've been writing longer, more of my friends are writing and telling me about it. They'll send me their stuff. And then I would be on the phone with them for an hour, like, let's talk about this. And then it was always so fulfilling for me. And then the feedback I'd always get was like, oh my gosh, that was so great. Like I actually got to talk to someone about it and not just pitch it and then get like a cold thing of notes and not even have the chance to not like defend yourself, but to explain yourself and go like, does your note still make sense if I tell you this? You know what I mean? Because sometimes it doesn't. And so that is like the side thing that I do. But the accountability thing is what you and I did. Yeah. And that is more so if you have an idea that you either have just started or you haven't
had
started
7 years ago. You know, what are you going to do?
That's very common though. A lot of people who hit me up are like, I've had this idea for 10 years and it's so special to me up here. And I am terrified of what it will be on the page. And I'm like, let's do this. Like, because it ultimately breaks my heart when I hear that. Cause I'm like, if it's still up there, it's not meant, you're meant to get it out. And there's going to be a disconnect between what you have in your head and the page. But that's the beauty of writing and rewriting is that every draft is meant to get you closer to exactly what's in your head. And so the accountability program is like, we meet up weekly and we have a first session where we essentially figure out what the script is you're working on, what your time frame goal is. And like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. And I ask specifically, are there things you need from me? And I also just have my own that I'll do anyway. And then we meet up weekly. And my only rules are no matter what, we're always reading new pages, which scares the shit out of everybody. But I'm like, it's my one hard and fast rule because it's the biggest motivating factor. It's what changed everything for me. And I'm like, no. And also I think we don't get to hear our words spoken out loud enough.
No, it was terrifying.
Ourselves,
that was so scary. It's so true because writing it and hearing it in your head and then hearing it in a room with other people. So you're like, oh shit, okay, that didn't work.
Well, because sometimes
this did, or this
100. Sometimes you need to hear your dialogue and not at a table read because like that's overwhelming. Like the energy that goes into building a table, like asking all your friends, all these
Oh,
people,
God.
and you're like, this is the first time I've heard it out loud. That is a little intimidating. And like, do you if that's what you want to do? But that's part of what I love about doing this with someone is that if someone wants notes afterwards, we do them. But some people don't. They're like, I don't even need it because just hearing it, like,
yeah, is enough.
I got it.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of some of the basics of what I do. But
Well, I think the cool thing you do too is like you're super flexible with who you're working with, right? And you have all these different tool sets. And I know you have like different types of programs you offer within that. But like being able to, go from one person who has issues with this script and then coming over to someone like me who you're like, I'm going to give you some prompts for a character. We don't even need to see this in the script. But like stuff like that is so insanely helpful. It's just stuff I never thought about before. And I really think a lot of this, like, due to your wide array of skill set with this, I really do think this program can help anyone of any sort of level within the screenwriting process. And I know, I joked about it being script therapy at the beginning because yes, the script is in the hot seat, but I found myself in that hot seat so many times with myself because of the questions that were asked. I was like, oh shit, you're right. I am censoring myself. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? So I think it even goes beyond just the process of screenwriting itself and kind of dips into like the person as a screenwriter also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like that, because writing is just fundamentally personal. And
Yeah.
so when you have a block with your story, it's hard to not take that personal. I mean, to this day, like, even though I'm doing all this, I'm like always very upfront with everyone. I'm like, I still like ask my husband, like, I'll be doing a rewrite and he's like, which day is today? I'm like, oh, today's the day I suck and no one should ever read this ever again. And he's like, okay,
See
we'll
the
talk.
shredder?
Yeah.
Hell
And
yeah.
then he's like, all right, well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And then the next day I'm like, this is the best thing ever. So it's like, but I've just normalized it for myself where it doesn't scare me as much anymore. And so I feel like that it is, the whole thing feels like script therapy because a lot of times if I'm asking someone like, all right, what do you think this block is? They're like, I just think I suck. And I know that that's not true. I'm like, no, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
But like, and so I think that there is an emotional vulnerability to
Sure,
it
yeah.
because normally that's why I think writers have such a, like, not a bad rap, but like such like this cynical, like, recluse and because we do all of that negative self-sabotage internally and then we kind of stew in it. And sometimes having like someone literally just sitting with you and being like, hey, I see you and this is all valid, but like feel it and then let's let it go and then let's keep going and see what happens. Like it is remarkable. And I feel so fortunate to see how much of a difference that alone makes for someone. Like literally just being like, you're not alone. I'm sitting with you.
Yeah.
This is normal. And what would happen if we keep moving through this? Or like you said, okay, you're stuck on this character. I'm going to send you prompts this week and then it's going to open stuff up for you. And then it does. And then you felt totally different about it. So it's cool.
100%.
It really is. It's like, it's kind of intuitive and it's really beautiful though. It does feel like deeper work than just screenwriting, but it's like, I would never claim that, but
Well, there's
it
a lot that
definitely is,
goes
yeah.
into any, I think,
Creative.
fields. Like there's you have like this talent, but there's a lot that goes behind just even the skills of it. There's a whole lot of mental fuckery that goes on.
Yeah,
that you're
good
just
and
like,
bad.
I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a question. Do you think that your program is good for asking for a friend if they have no experience with screenwriting, only playwriting? Do you think that somebody could come to the table asking for a friend, of course, hypothetically?
Does the friend want to screenwrite? Is that what they're
Yeah,
into?
they have lots of ideas.
Absolutely.
I'd say
yeah.
yes right
Yeah.
now. 'Cause I don't really have any idea. I'd written PAs with Tom. That was kind of it.
Yeah,
So yes.
I'm the
100%.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you. I acknowledge you.
I have a
Welcome to the
lot
table.
of ideas that I'm
Yeah.
just like, and I write them down because
Yeah.
Bonnie's like, write that shit down. And I'm like, it's the mental wall. It's the
Mhm.
block where you're just like, I don't know how to screenwrite. So automatically it's just like,
Oh yeah.
Well, you kill yourself 1,000 times before you even like had a chance to run.
And
right?
that's literally why I called it blank page because I was like, it really is a trigger for people. Like
Yeah.
it's just a little blank. You see it in the movies and you're like, but it's real. Just like the little.
like some of those
I mean,
movies that have like the blinking
mine's not
cursor that
necessarily-
you're like, cool.
Mine's not necessarily blank. Mine
cool.
just says fade in.
Okay, so
it's
you're
like-
stuck on fade. Oh, you're
that's
one
it.
of those guys.
And
It's like, I got started.
All right,
The title
all right.
page
You're
looks
a
great.
fade in guy. Gotcha.
No, I mean, I know I said it already, but literally anyone can be a part of this. And a lot of the shit I learned from it, I can apply to other creative processes as well, which is pretty amazing. But like, I thought it was such a cool program. I've totally fallen in love with it. And I think, I started off going like, yeah, I want to write this short film. And then like 90 pages later, I was like, oh, it's not that. And it was a cool thing to discover. And I think you do it in such a way that's like, again, for any level, like you can come to the table and approach it in a way that's very nuanced and very honest. I think that's pretty cool.
I'm sure this happens sometimes in the therapy sessions because I think to Corey's point, some people might have a story and they don't know what it belongs to.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know if it's a short, they don't know if it's a film, they don't know if it's a TV show. Sometimes it's a comic, sometimes it's a book. And I think that part of the, allowing yourself to express and find the hiccups allows you like, oh, I discovered that part. And I think that happens in writing, particularly because it is supposed to be like imagination unbound. But like, we're just constantly just like, well, it's got to be put in script format. So I think just even finding the root, the
Even
points
if
of
getting it on the page.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's like from here to
and
the page.
and sometimes it doesn't come down to like the format. Sometimes it comes down to, well, why is this character this? Well, why are we here? Why does the story need to be told?
And for everybody, it's different. And that's why it's like, ultimately, it's like, to keep using therapy words, like it's creating a safe space for someone, honestly, because it's not only normalizing, it's also like empowering. Like I like to empower people because
Because you've been on the other side as well.
I still, it depends on the day or the hour with something that I'm like, I get it, but let's help you get out of your way instead of just sitting here forever. And that's the beauty of accountability is I think it's so often like the word accountability isn't necessarily like stressful, but I sometimes think when we think about like, I need to get something done by this time, it often feels like the opposite of creativity. And yet what I have found is that it is the best boost, that creativity. So I think there's like an aloofness that like some people associate with like creativity, not an aloofness, but just kind of like this like floating, like it'll just like come when it comes. And like I said, I had one script that literally violently was like, we're doing this, but that's not the exception. It's the exception. And if I chased that all the time, I would probably never write something ever again.
The pitfall of only writing when you think you're going to feel like writing.
And so it's like, no, we're doing this every week and you have no obligation to be perfect or to do anything with this afterwards. That's the other thing is like when you were tripping on like, well, but you wanted to self-edit a lot, which a lot of people do. And I was like, not yet.
Yeah.
Like, let's get you to finish line first. And then once you did, it's really beautiful though. Like it's also interesting for me to witness like these, how I know what my things are that stand in my way and then seeing how different it manifests for everyone. Like I'm not as much of a self-editor, but like, I have other stuff that I'm like, okay, Carlie, like, okay. And so it's so interesting, like, all right, move through.
Yeah,
But,
I get you. I see you. As we're wrapping up, I kind of want to pull back, like even further, like getting really simple brass tacks kind of thing for people that are watching and for people that are like, maybe I want to give this a go. What are the tools that you use, like Final Draft, pen and paper, apps that you might be using for your creative process of writing? Like
coffee or tea?
Do you mean like literally just a pen and paper, like to write notes?
Yeah, I mean, like what kind of tools do you use
that are essential for you?
That are essential for your writing process?
Well, if you listen to Script Notes, you know that Craig Mazin would not like what I'm about to say, but I love Final Draft. I just do.
You know what I use? Highland 2.
And I've heard wonderful things, and I ultimately I think at some point probably will dip a toe somewhere else. But I just love Final Draft. Like I just have no complaints.
But I mean I'm assuming that was like your first language.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Corey and I did all the dump like Celtics, writer's duet. So it's like,
well, no, I take that back. Celtics was
when it was free.
When it was free.
Yep.
Back in the day.
That was the time. That was the time, baby.
Oh, God. But yeah, so I would say like I love Final Draft, but ultimately I don't think it totally matters as long as you just find like the soft, whatever works for you.
Spike Lee writes all his in a notebook first.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. For me, it's Final Draft and notes on my phone. Like my notes on my phone is my precious, sweet little baby.
It like a new note that like when you have an idea, you're like, you write a new note.
And if you looked at my notes, you'd be like, is she okay? Like sometimes it'll just be like,
notes.
It'll be like, consider Jack moving differently. And I know because I've done what you said where I'm too vague and it's literally just like, gets too vulnerable here. And then I'm like, what did that mean?
What the fuck was I talking about?
I can't decode you. So now I'm like, okay, if I throw a character name in there or something like that, like, then I'll know. So I have 1,000 notes on my phone.
It looks like different entries from different characters. Like,
it's just random and weird. But that is
feels like that Great British Bake Off when they just give them the list of ingredients and like they don't tell you what order to put it in. I guess bake for how long?
Essentially. So I would say for me, it's like Final Draft and it's the Notes app on my phone. And I will here and there just pen and paper write some stuff out. More prompts. I feel like if it's less about the actual script and it's more about like the character work or whatever, where I just want to explore stuff, that's a little more pen and papery for me. But other than that, I'm a simple gal. It's just final draft and it's notes.
I have to ask, have you ever like physically drawn out like plot points or character like arcs?
No,
or...
you know what? That's not, and it's so fascinating to me. I posted something the other day that I saw. I don't remember if you saw it or Sierra saw it. I remember. I think it was you who was like all the different ways that like for like Academy Award winners or something like that.
Yeah,
people
that was me.
wrote, and it was like
Fascinating.
it was each one couldn't have been more different. One was like straight up like all pen and paper, and then someone else puts it, somewhere like whatever. And then another was way more like they couldn't have been more different. And
One was like structured like outlines like everywhere,
yeah,
like
and so
beat by beat.
that's not my thing. Like I've tried it, but again, I'm like, oh, that's not my thing. And instead of making myself feel like shit or like less of a writer for
Why
it,
isn't it my thing?
But yeah, no, it's amazing. It's like it's as much as you're like, I'm like that.
But
that
they
is
do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like really allowing like radical self-acceptance of like what works for me and what
yeah.
doesn't.
I mean, I think there's part of it too, to just put it on the positive side to stave off the anxiety is just like, well, I don't need that shit.
there you go.
Fuck them.
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah. And so I mean, there's some people that need certain things and some people who don't.
I will say I used to never outline ever. And then when I started working with more producers, they were like,
I don't want to read this.
remember that time you just like writing scripts and you don't like doing any? I'm like, They're like, yeah, no, that doesn't work anymore. I'm like, shit.
We'd like to see your outline.
Yeah,
So here's a 40-page outline.
Yeah, before you
Show your work.
Exactly. I do prefer like
God.
treatments and scriptments because then I can just do it my way. Like I don't like, I like long-winded. I don't like short. But that being said, having to learn that, working with people that were like, you need to do this, I've gotten better at it and it doesn't freak me out quite as much. But
It's no longer a block.
not
Right.
at all. But it is not my innate way. But I'm learning depending on the project, or if it's like something, if I'm up for like adapting something, I'm like, well, of course I'm doing a treatment. I'm not writing a script for like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. But so outlining was one of those things for me where it was not something that came natural to me. It was not something I felt I needed until other people got in the building.
I'm in a couple different writing discourses on the internet and stuff like that. I wanted to ask you, just because I think it's kind of an interesting thing. What do you find easier to do, writing action or writing dialogue?
Dialogue all day.
Now
all day.
why not action?
I think a huge part of it is I think it's a couple things. I think one, having an acting background, knowing so much of how I build a character when I'm reading something is through the dialogue. I feel like I get to know really who someone is through dialogue. So having that be there before I started writing was, to me, I always feel like I get to know my character so much better through the dialogue. And I also feel like I'm like, for lack of a better term, kind of like channeling a character when I'm in dialogue and very rarely in action. Action, I get a little bit more thinky, and my first draft is the prose is like, whoo, child. I mean, it's like, yeah, like my first draft, I was like,
Thick.
Yeah.
Just thick blocks.
yes. My first draft is always just like floral and like you. The good news is I remember one time I did share a first draft with someone. I don't know if that was a stupid thing or not, but they were like, the good news is I can literally see everything you're describing, but I think you can do it with a lot less words. And I was like, yes. So
God, yes.
So I've learned to do that way quicker now. I'm not as precious anymore about, I used to be really precious about it. And you kind of can't be about certain things, but action, I just think, to me, we've talked about this a lot, how you can say the most with the least amount. And it's the most fulfilling work when you can do it and you find it, you're like, that sentence pops. Like that is exactly what I'm
so
trying
much
to say.
in 5 letters.
Yes,
in 5
you're
words,
just
you're
like, oh.
shit.
But that being said, it's also stressful to me because I think there's also a lot of, you hear a lot of, script notes or whatever else. You hear a lot of people's opinions about action. Like it's, it's too floral, it's too this, it's too that. And again, it's like, I don't know. I just prefer, and I also prefer reading dialogue and scripts myself. As a reader, I do tend to zone out a little bit more if it gets too action heavy. I'm just more based in dialogue. But so I think that's probably why. But I also think the acting is a huge part of that. It's just like how I've always read scripts. So it's like I always
It's a
have to
first
remember-
language thing again. It's like
100%,
here's where I used to live. And
Absolutely. But that being said, when you read good action, it's like, ooh, And when you write good action, it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Reading the Matrix script is great.
Oh, I gotta read that.
It's good. It's great.
Interesting.
Just the opening sequence, you're like, oh my god. And when they write it in such a good tone, you're like, oh, this is noir. No, it's not noir. What's going on?
I want to read Dune so bad because all I kept thinking when I was watching is I was like, I'm that nerd now that I'm like, God, I want to read this script. Like, this is like my husband's over there, like the cinematographer. I'm like, I want to read these pages, baby. Like, because it is like when you see something that is so world building, and like there is dialogue, but it is such a visual film. I was like, I want to read how they wrote this action.
Yeah, I would love to see how they did the Gum Jabbar scene.
Oh my God.
Okay, so what did they write? Because I feel like you don't have to write anything. You can just do all the dialogue.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
I'm curious that there's a script for a movie called Together. It had James McAvoy in it. It was a recent movie. And it's just two people. And I'd be really, for me as an actor, I was like, I want to read this. I want to do this.
Yeah.
This is really cool. I want to do so, because it was one of those movies that I walked away that I was like, as a potential writer and
I should write this.
As an actor, I was like, this is something that I would want to make.
Right.
Like it had so much heart and moments that you were like, I need to pause this. I'm going to go fetal. I'll BRB.
Yeah.
But I think earlier you were saying
how
like
visual that is.
finding the scripts that speak to you. That's like things that you want to write are going to be fucking.
Yeah, it's like,
huge.
how did they explain this moment?
And
Like-
truthfully, the best thing you can do is find that script. And I will say anyone who knows me, nothing bothers me more than the lack of accessibility to so many scripts out there. It drives me insane. There's no better tool for writers to become better writers than to read already made scripts.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's impossible. Like, I think Script Lab has like a bunch.
And the tough thing is that there's websites that just have like a transcription of it and it's not information.
And honestly, that to me, I'm like, should be illegal. Like the transcription is not
garbage.
a script. It's garbage. And like, I remember, I love Silver Linings Playbook and I could not find it for so long. And I kept finding the damn transcript. And I was like, if this is anything like the script, this is awful. And the movie was great, but the script is bad. Then I read the script and it's absolutely amazing.
And it's even tenfold for TV.
100%.
Because you're just like, how am I going to find this specific episode that was like a bottle episode?
Yeah.
And it's like written by some person that was just brought off the street.
It's truly like one of the things that I just wish.
But there's no like category.
That's why when I gave you the script that I gave you, Corey, it was such a big deal because I was like, I have access to these scripts.
Well, and you find your little pockets, and don't get me started on when you have to when you have to pay for them. There's we watched Angel Heart not that long ago, and I really wanted to read the script for it for some reason. I was like, I'm so fascinated by this. I want to read the script. But I had to pay freaking money for it. And I did it because I was curious enough. And I was like, whatever, but I won't do that again probably soon. But like, to me, I'm like, that is the easiest thing to give back to like the up and coming writing community and actors too.
But also don't people above want better writers? Don't they want them to be like, oh, learn from the best, learn from the great?
Well, and the other thing is then a lot of times what they do drop is not what they do drop. That just sounded kind of cool. I don't know.
Do drop.
I don't know. Write a song about it, Corey.
Yeah.
Do what they do drop.
Get my notes out.
It's about the morning
I'm just
rain,
going to write the
right?
word do drop, and in a week I'll go, what the fuck is this?
Exactly. What they do put out there is the altered script after they shot, and not the script. Yeah, and like again, I'll take it over nothing. I will take it.
Right.
But again, I'm like, it is so much more of an education to show writers actually what did they shoot the movie off of, and then ultimately because that to me, I say that to a lot of people, especially if they are starting to dip a toe. I'm like, pick your favorite movie, watch it, go read the script, and then do the opposite. Read the script, go watch the movie, because it's the ultimate education. It just is.
There's one thing that I also learned. I did do one of those mentorship writer lab things and all that stuff. And you're 100% right. That like you can pay a lot of money, you maybe get marginal differences out of it, but finding someone that you could be personal with is like tenfold because they're catering towards you versus like you're in a class and you're like, I'm some random butthole. But to that point, to add
visual,
I'm a random butthole out of all
heard
the
it here,
kids. Don't watch your favorite movie and then try to write it yourself, and then see what sticks out most for you, and then read the script and be like, I didn't write anything what they wrote, but then that tells you what your language is. That tells you like, oh,
you wrote the butthole version.
You wrote the butthole version, which is like this is Seymour butthole version. So
there it is. Well. I think this could easily be a 4-hour
note to
end
on. Before we get to the ending housekeeping, where can people follow you? Where can they find your program? Where do we?
Do you want to be followed?
Only online, even that still kind of freaks me out. I don't know. The whole thing still.
We're
is
gonna
a little-
flood and send them all to you.
Yeah, I don't know. The Instagram I have for this particular program is at blank page coaching. Right, Corey?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
My brain just went, right? No, it is.
Check it out.
It is. It's at blank page coaching. My regular Instagram is just Carley M. Casey. But then my website is my name, carleycasey.com. And it has some of my background and all that stuff. But then if you go to coaching, it has all the info that you would need to contact me and do a free consult. And that is something I will say that I'm very passionate about is like, we do free consults because it has to be a mutual match. It's not just about someone being like, or me being like, are you right for me? It has to be mutual.
It can't be a
for
random
sure.
bubble.
It can't be a random
No.
bubble. And listen,
There are some.
And you know what? Absolutely. But also like someone might ultimately talk to me and go, actually, I thought this was something else, not whatever. And so I feel very strongly
Two-way
about
street.
absolutely. Like
Yeah.
you can't do something
Well,
like
you're
this.
entering into a very personal agreement.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and
think.
any guru off the street would just take you in.
100%.
And you're not a
And
guru.
I'm like, hell no.
No.
Mhm.
Hell no. So it's really like, it's a 20-minute where we just talk about what it would look like, what you think you need, all that stuff. So if you want to do that, know that we're doing a 20-minute consult for free before we do anything because it's important to me that we both feel 2 thumbs up about it.
Yeah. I cannot recommend it enough. Jump
Thank
on
you,
it, y'all.
Corey. You're
it
the
was very
best.
cool. Yeah.
Can I
Well, it
also
was
can
awesome.
I just add a little bit just for everyone who is planning on doing the 20-minute console? Also, just thank Carly because it takes time. Like when everyone reads your script and they just like, okay, cool, and you didn't pay for it. That's big. That's huge. And,
Yeah.
and taking your creative like advice, I think that's huge. So
Yeah, anytime Bonnie, when she would have a friend read her script, she was like, wow, they took the time to like take in my words.
And absolutely. And I will say, I do want to specify just to be clear, the 20-minute consult, because some people are actually, as they should be, very protective of their stuff. I won't read anything until we have an agreement set in place because a lot of people are paranoid about their stuff being taken which is both totally, I get it. And the other part of me is like, no one's stealing your stuff, but I get it. I do get it. So that being said, we do a consult before I read anyone's thing because I want it to be clear that there is a trust there. And I obviously have like terms and agreement. Like I'm not going to touch it. I
Yes.
can't do anything.
everyone's
whatever.
protecting everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everyone's protected. But also that is why I love the script therapy so much because I'm like, I want to take the actual time with someone. And that means me typically reading a script 3 to 4 times. You know what I mean? It's not once. It's not one and done. It's like hours on my part of like, I'm treating this like it's my own. So
I feel like we could
I
do
think we did-
a part 2 of Protect Yourself.
Yeah.
protect yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell
absolutely.
a story after we're done.
Okay.
But
But yes, there
Protect
is.
yourself. Part
By the
2.
way, I did not mean to in any way just seem like I was disregarding the point of protecting yourself. You should. That's why I
Yes.
don't take people's work unsolicited. I just mean sometimes people get very. I had
You're like,
some-
let me help you.
yeah, yeah.
I'm here to help.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's remember that.
Yes. That's
Anyways.
all. Yes.
Protect yourself.
Thank you so much for joining
This
us.
was
Thank you
awesome.
for
Yeah.
having
Thank
me,
you
guys.
so
Amazing.
much.
Everybody at home, thank you so much for listening wherever you're at. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are everywhere podcasts can be heard. So stop by, rate and review us there. And
Tell us
share
where
with your
you're
friends
at.
and family. If you're on YouTube, thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Subscribe, share with your friends and family, all that kind of stuff. All of our housekeeping, all of the stuff, the links, the socials, all that kind of stuff can be found nerdon.tv. It has all of the linky links everywhere that we can be found. Our whole catalog is there. Some of the podcast apps do limit how many podcast episodes show. So you can go right to our website and the hundreds of episodes are there. So check it out. Do consider joining that Nerd On Nation, like I mentioned at the top. That does help us grow and to be the best that we can be. It allows us to upgrade our content and all that kind of stuff. So do check it out, nerdon.tv /
If nothing else, just watch
Patreon.
Tom for a little
Yeah,
bit.
you can just,
Hey, we want you to grow. We
Tom
want us
can.
to grow.
This.
We want you to grow in your writing.
and there's always innuendo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, hey,
Nuance.
hey, hey,
It's called nuance.
hey,
John.
hey, we're Nerd On the Shower. You could be the listener, the grower.
Okay.
Oh.
Wow. So on that,
Let's get the hell out of here.
we appreciate you all. Take care of yourselves. You know the drill. As always,
Nerd on.
Ending broadcast.